like to introduce my friend, Mayor, Premier, and Ambassador, Lord Campbell.
And this is a little of the tables turned. I was his press secretary from 2008 to 2010, and I have been waiting every day since to have you on the hot seat. So here we go. Actually, I do want to start with I'm going to start with something that is very recent, only because I think many of us woke up yesterday morning and we watched an incredible ceremony and a tribute to another legend, the Queen. And it was just a remarkable day where you had an opportunity to see the end of an era, really. And I read your article that you wrote in the Globe and Mail, and you talked about meeting the Queen and spending time with the Queen. But as the former High Commissioner to the UK, I mean, what was going through your mind yesterday as you were watching the pomp, the ceremony, and just the incredible display?
A lot of things, and some I'm not going to tell you. I felt very lucky, to be honest. I felt lucky that I had got to meet Her Majesty on a number of occasions. The first time I met Her Majesty was in 1987. And she was coming to Vancouver, and there was an organization known as the Arts, Science, and Technology Center who were trying to take the science world and make it something that was important for children. And they were having real difficulty getting support from the provincial government. And so I suggested maybe a way to get support from the provincial government was to ask Her Majesty to come to Science World to open it up. And we did, and the support poured in from the provincial government. This is what I really remember, is as we were there, my sons, Jeff and Nico, at that time were 11 and 8. And I think Jeff gave her a hologram of the city crest, and Nico gave her some flowers. And this is one of the things that's exceptional about her. Her Majesty bent over, looked at the two boys, and looked up at Nancy and said, "What beautiful boys." She had me from then on, right? She was incredibly personable. She was curious. And she asked questions not because she had an answer. She asked questions because she wanted to hear your answer. She was really exceptional that way. And someone who was with me for 17 years while I was elected, Lara Daphne, is here today. And she was in London at one point, and she said to me, and I'd been almost there for 5 years, which is how long you get to stay. 4 years typically, 5 years because it was extended. And she said, is there anything you'd really like to do in the United Kingdom now that it's almost time for you to go? And I remember saying to her, what I'd really like to do is have a real conversation with Her Majesty. Because when you're in those lines and Her Majesty says hi and you say hi back and you have maybe one sentence or maybe two sentences you can exchange, we got better at that. I could get 3 or 4 sentences out of her after I'd been with her been there for a while. But at any rate, she said, I said I'd like that. Well, within a couple of days, I don't think it was because of Lara, although she may take credit for this. In a couple of days, we had a call from the palace. And they said, would the High Commissioner be interested in coming and staying overnight at Windsor Castle and having dinner with Her Majesty? Needless to say, I said, look, I'm a very, very busy man. But I'll try to squeeze it in. So they give you a list of what you're going to do, and they say you're going to start here, there'll be a reception, and then you're going to have to hurry to put on your tux to go to the formal dinner. You'll go to the dinner, and then you'll stay overnight, then you'll go back to where you came from. Fine, I thought to myself. Her Majesty at this point is 90 years old. And at I think it was about 5 o'clock, we went for drinks, and there was Prince Philip, and I think the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were there, and a whole group of people. The designer of the iPhone, the first iPhone, a major bishop from really important people were there, right? As well as the person I call Little Gordy C was standing around in that group as well. And so we had our drinks, and we rushed back, and I thought, I've got to rush to get my tux on. I've never taken an hour to put on my tux in my life, but I got it done. I went to dinner. Now, when you go to dinner, those dinners, there's a big table, and they've got names next to seats. And I figured, I know who I am, so I figured I'd be about as far away from Her Majesty as I can get. I look at the table. I can't see my name. It doesn't seem to be there. So I go up to the butler, and I say to the head butler, I say, excuse me, could you tell me where I'm sitting? I think maybe I'm sitting in the kitchen tonight. It could be, maybe Windsor Castle has a basement I haven't heard about. And he says, well, who are you? Which wasn't one of the best things he could have asked. So I said, well, I'm Canada's High Commissioner. My name is Gordon Campbell. He says, oh, you'll be sitting right beside Her Majesty. So I got to sit right beside Her Majesty for the entire dinner. And we had a great conversation, the whole gamut of conversations. What's going on in Canada? What's going on with the Governors General? How are your grandkids? What's the matter with kids today anyways? They're always on their phones. I hate that. You know, normal stuff that grandparents talk about. And it was just a great conversation, right? I just really enjoyed it. And I finally said to myself, Gord, you've got to stop talking to Her Majesty, because probably the guy on the left side of her would like to chat with her as well. I'll tell you one little Campbell nugget. I'm a little kid. I pick up a piece of bread and I start to butter it in my hand. And my grandmother says, Gordy, if you're ever having dinner with Her Majesty, you can't pick your bread up off your plate. I'm sitting there in Windsor Castle and my grandmother is talking to me the entire time. At any rate, it was a great dinner. 10 o'clock, Her Majesty stands up and says, why don't we go to the archives? Now, I thought that was a great idea to go to the archives, and everyone, when Her Majesty says, let's go to the archives, you say, yeah, let's go to the archives. That's a fantastic. Anyways, we walk down, we get to the archives. She says, she sort of gestures to the end of the aisle. There at the end of the aisle are the 2010 Winter Olympic gloves, opened up with the Maple Leafs, the gold medal hockey jersey, and I think, this is great. And she says, oh, and she points over to another table. There's George Vancouver's original map naming Vancouver, where I was mayor, Point Grey, where I used to be an MLA, and then she says, oh, here. She points to Queen Victoria's letter where she names British Columbia. There's 3 choices, she crosses out 2, and it's British Columbia. And I look at Her Majesty and I say, Your Majesty, this is incredible. And she looks back at me and her eyes are laughing and she says, not that incredible really, it's why I have an archivist. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's really, for me, is sad is I can't use my Her Majesty imitations anymore. And I used to love, I can remember in '87 when I met her going around the mayor's office, practicing what Her Majesty would say to me and what I might say back to her. But at any rate, she was an incredible person. She was far more interested, I think, than people thought. She kept her thoughts to herself, and I feel very lucky to have got to know her even that little bit. Right?
So you were a council member for a long time, and you were a mayor for a very long time, and you had, Peter talked about it, I mean, you had a hand in shaping the city, the revitalization of False Creek and Yaletown. There was a number of initiatives that you led. There is a lot of public discussion and media attention now on the state of our city. Public safety and crime, just about, a lack of vision, where are we going? What do you think about where the city has come since you left city politics, and what needs to be done to get us in a kind of trajectory that you would see that was more similar to the growth trajectory we had? We were talking about Expo 86 and a number of other initiatives that really propelled our city forward.
Right. Well, first, one of the reasons I ran for office was because Expo 86 was coming and we had a council that always said what was wrong. No one ever talked about what was right. And I was lucky very early in my life to meet someone who was from the United Kingdom. And he kept on reminding me we live in the 3rd largest city and the 2nd largest country in the world, and we couldn't live in a better place. And that's true. And one of the challenges, I think, with Vancouver is always that we sort of look over our shoulder or somewhere else as opposed to exactly where we are and what we can do here. I'll tell you, the main thing I've noticed, I come back now having been away for about 10 years. The main thing I notice now is we've lost a lot of the sense of village community that we used to have. That we've sort of stripped away a lot of the local merchants that used to be there, the sense of cohesion that we used to have. And I think you sort of can't negotiate that after the fact. You have to decide what you want. You have to have a vision of where you want to go. And I'll tell you, I looked at, people often talk about accountability, and I actually felt I never ran for something that I didn't see a whole bunch of things that I wanted to get done. And I articulated them. And when Jamie's here, Jamie was working on my first mayoralty campaign with Matthew Watson, who's here, and a bunch of other people who haven't learnt yet. But I can tell you that it was a time where I said, I think we can be something different. We don't have to look over our shoulders to San Francisco or Venice or anywhere else. We can be Vancouver because we're at the crossroads. And I still think that that's the case with Vancouver. I think you have to recognize the changes that we've had. And the changes we face is our community's changed dramatically. I'll tell you one thing our community's done that we don't recognize is we've aged. We've driven young families out of the city. A lot of young families can't say to themselves, where can I live here? And we're locked in a sort of a form that is, to be blunt, ancient. It's older than me. And I think that's an important thing for us to think about. So I think the city's got to go back to its roots. And the roots are we're a Pacific city. We have outreach to Asia. We have outreach to Europe. We have connections down the coast to the south. But I think the important thing is who are we? And where do we live? And what do we want? And we have to define that. And you should include the community in defining it. But then you should act on it. And I want a place where seniors can live comfortably and safely, where families can live affordably, and we can do those things. But you have to say that's what we want to do, and then you have to follow a plan to do it. One of the things we miss is kind of executive power. And I just should say this right now. People often ask me, what do you miss? I miss actually empowering people to do great things for other people. So I want to use the Zajac Ranch as an example. The Zajac Foundation decided they wanted to do something. I'm sure the leadership that Mel showed and the family showed, without that leadership, you don't get there. But after you've defined that vision, you need to bring in volunteers, you need to bring in staff people, you need to bring in community support to reach that vision. It's work. Executing any plan is work. It's not, I feel good about it because I've given you a brochure. It's, I feel good about it because I've done stuff to accomplish the goal. And I think we should all recognize the incredible gift that the Zajac family and foundation have given to literally untold numbers of kids that have made their lives better. That's what we should all try and do in public life. Is this the short snapper section?
No, this is, I'm just providing a few questions.
Okay.
You can go in any direction you want. But I'm glad you said, and Peter, you said it too, about leaving a place in a better situation, a better condition. And I think that many would agree that that's exactly what you did, whether you were mayor or whether you were premier or even as the commissioner of the UK. But part of the problem, I think, is that it's really hard to get things done now. Why is that? Like, looking back on your service in different levels of government, why is it so damn hard to get things done?
Well, I think there's one really fundamental reason. And that is, if you run for office to be popular, you're not going to get very much done. Because people don't really spend the time that they need to spend to find out what you're doing and why you're doing it. So people would often come up to me and say, I'd like to run for office. I'd say, great, what would you like to do? They'd say, well, I'd really like to be a counselor. Okay, but what would you like to do? Well, I'd like to go. No, you don't really want to go to council meetings and listen to public hearings about things that you're not even aware of right now and do all that. What is it you want to accomplish in the city? And it's the same question at the provincial level. What do you want to accomplish? I'd love to be in cabinet. Yeah, I get that, but what do you want to do? How do you want to get there? What do you want to leave behind? After you lose the next election, what do you want to say you've done, right? And so I do think that's a critical component, and you have to recognize that all you can do at the end of the day is look in the mirror and say, I tried to do the best that I could do, and I made the right decisions. I have to feel that way, or my colleagues have to feel that way. And if you can't get there, you're going to be all over the map, right? So I can tell you from my perspective, I mean, I'll give you an example of this, which was the 2010 Olympics. It was an NDP idea. They said they wanted to do the 2010 Olympics. And they asked me, I think I was leader of the opposition, said, would you like to support that? I said, sure. So then we got elected and we had to get it done. So first off, I chatted with Peter about who we could get to come in and help us do that. He suggested Jack Poole. Jack Poole came in and he was the leader. I wasn't the leader, I was the helper. He was the leader. He put together a team. And that team included not just professionals, but people who from the community who would support him and drive it forward. And he created a spirit for the Olympics that was, I think, truly exceptional. And here's what was exceptional about Jack Poole. He got that the Olympics were never about Jack Poole. They were never about the people that did the Olympics. They were about the athletes and the community. And Peter was Canada's representative on the board. Peter was one of the people that went to the federal government and said, we have to make this Canadian. We want to make this torch relay touch every part of the country. We want Canadians to own these Olympics. And you know, I felt it was important for Canada to own the Olympics because we were going to benefit. The more we brought Canada in, the more British Columbia would benefit, the more our athletes would benefit. Every province contributed to own the podium, but it took leadership, then it took a team of people. And I think that one of the great myths of leadership is one person can do anything. One person needs others to help him or her do it.
Gord,
Yeah.
I got to interject, 'cause what you just said is not true.
It's not?
I can tell you, the Alberta Olympics were the Alberta Olympics. They didn't even include Edmonton. From day one,
Calgary Olympics.
the Calgary, from day one, you said this will be Canada's games every time you spoke. And you made it Canada's games. And when they closed Yorkville to celebrate a hockey game in Vancouver, you know you succeeded. But you were the push of Canada's games, not me.
Well,
I helped you.
you did. You helped a lot. That's exactly right. My point is you have to be committed to it. I don't know if you remember this. After the games, a lot of people forgot this. There were a whole bunch of people against the Olympic Games.
First couple
There
of
were a
days
whole
of
bunch,
the start
whole
of the
bunch
games,
of people
I think
saying
all
we
of
should
them-
never do this.
HARC.
Yeah. There were a whole bunch of people that said Canada shouldn't even try to win gold medals. Just imagine that. So when you try to do anything that's for the whole community, all you can do is say, this is what I like to try and do. Support me and I'm going to do it. If you don't support me, I won't do it. But I think one of the problems is people today are trying to have everyone agree with them. There's lots of times that people don't agree with you. I'll tell you one quick story from when I'm running for, I was running for leader of the party, the BC Liberals. And I was having coffee parties around and talking to people. So I was at one for one evening and I'm talking to a group of people and they say, you know, I'm saying goodbye and thank you for coming. At one point, one guy leaves and he says, well, I don't think I can support you. And he said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me why? He says, well, I don't agree with everything you did when I was mayor. I said, well, look, I was mayor for 7 years. I don't agree with everything I did when I was mayor. All you can do is your best when you're doing it, right? And fix it if you need to.
What would you say is the hardest thing that you had to go through and accomplish, an accomplishment that was really tough to get over the line?
I'm not sure you ever get things accomplished. I think that it was very difficult to go through the whole process of trying to get the financial framework in shape for British Columbia, and I think we did that in lots of ways. I'll tell you this, I think we all face 3 really significant challenges. The first one is wishful thinking. I just wish it would go away. This is a problem I wish we didn't have. The second one is willful blindness. I don't see it, I don't see it, I don't see it. And the third one is the tyranny of the status quo. And the third one is the most virulent, it's the most lasting, it's the most difficult. I mean, imagine just 10 years ago, maybe now 15, but certainly 15 years ago, there wasn't a government in Canada that would say, let's run huge deficits and not worry about it. Today, there isn't a government in Canada that says we should not run huge deficits and not worry about it. That's a very short period of time. We actually did 2 things that I think were really significant. The first one was the first day we were in office, we had a significant personal income tax cut across the board for everybody. And I can remember, we were very popular when we did that. It sent a message that things had changed in British Columbia. And in the fall of that year, I can remember we had some poll came out and it said we were popular, 66% people supported us. And I went into the caucus, and the caucus was just feeling juiced. They thought, God, 66%, we are fantastic. I can't believe how good we are. And I said to them, you guys, this is the highest you're ever going to see in your lives, and we're going nowhere but down. And we did. We went way down. I'll just tell you a popular, unpopular thing. So I'm elected in 2001, I got elected. I was very popular the day or two after I was elected. And I can remember being on the ferry going up to the Sunshine Coast. This guy's very excited about telling me how much he supports me. And I'm standing at the urinal on the ferry. And the guy comes up and says to me, "Can I shake your hand?" And I said, "Could you give me a minute, please?" Then that's one thing. The other one is when you're walking down the street after you've made some of these tough decisions, and we didn't make the decisions on the basis of it's 5% across the board. We really went through a process of saying, what does government need to do? Because if government doesn't need to do, get out of it. Because government's not that good at doing an awful lot of stuff. An awful lot of stuff. And one of the things I think we face in Canada, we have to learn to ask others who know what they're doing how to do it if we want to get where we want to go. So at any rate, when you get burnt in effigy, or you notice people you've known for 10 years running to the other side of the street when you're walking down the street, or if Starbucks, you're not sure if they're putting in the milk or the strychnine, you know that you're not very popular, right? So it's more fun being popular. It's better, I think, in general, to do what you feel is right, and you'll be more popular as a result of that.
I see quite a few young people in the crowd here. I don't include myself in that, so don't think that I'm saying this. But there's a narrative out there, and whether you spend time on social media, don't spend a lot of time on that, please, save your mental health. There's a narrative in the media itself, just that it is more complex now than it has ever been. We have climate change, there's geopolitical issues, look at Ukraine and Russia, there is rising costs and inflation, there's a complete polarization of the public discussion about all of these issues. Do you think that that is actually true, or, you know, you've had a lot of years in public service. Is it more challenging now because of all of these elements, whether some of them are new or just they have a bigger priority?
It's a challenge to do everything all at once the way someone wants you to do it, for sure. But it's not more challenging now. I can tell you, if you look at public policy today in Canada, we'll just look at Canada for a second, right? I can't think of a policy that's been more detrimental to the economic, social, and environmental health of the planet than our energy strategy in Canada. It has done nothing to accomplish our goals. And until we decide we're going to set some goals for ourselves and hold ourselves to account, or our governments to account, for what they're doing, we're going to keep on watching a deterioration of the quality of life. Just imagine what would have happened, where we would be in Canada today, if in fact, when Prime Minister Harper announced in 2012 we were going to be an energy superpower, if we'd moved towards that position. You can move toward that position by being environmentally sensible, and not only that, by showing environmental leadership. You can also move toward that position by engaging First Nations in a way that create a generational opportunity for growth, for education, for health, for community building. You can do all those things, but you can't when you say no. And I can remember growing up, when I was growing up, I can tell you Canada was known as a place that could do things. We could do the Trans-Canada Highway. We could do the St. Lawrence Seaway. We could do innumerable number of what we would call today mega projects. Today, none of them could be done. And the reason they can't be done is we don't require that we think through how you execute the plan. So I happen to be very strongly in favor of dealing with the issue of climate change. We had a policy that was recognized by many people as being very advanced. The revenue neutral carbon tax is revenue neutral. It says when you put a price on carbon, you have a lower income tax. It takes, the government doesn't use it to drive costs, to drive benefits for the government. We have to start saying to ourselves, what do we need to do to get there? So for example, if we had our natural gas going to Asia, we'd be getting 4 or 5 times the value for our natural gas, maybe even greater than that. I'm not up to date on that. 4 or 5 times the value for our natural gas. We would have First Nations along those routes would have huge economic benefits for skills training, for education, to do with what they want to do. Their choice, not our choice. Our own coffers would be filled by literally billions and billions of dollars for health care, for education. Who here thinks all of those things are working really well so far? You know, we can't keep on wishing that they were doing well. They're not doing well. And when we compare ourselves to others and we think, okay, well, we're in the middle, we're okay. Actually, lots of times we're at the bottom. So I think that there are difficult issues. Climate change is one that we can deal with, but you have to deal with a plan that you can execute. And I haven't seen any plans for execution. I'll tell you, while I'm in Vancouver, something that I've noticed is we're talking about affordable housing again. How many people here are over 60? Put up your hand if you're over 60. Do you remember talking about affordable housing when you were 20? Because I remember talking about affordable housing when I was 20. Civic politicians run saying they're going to do with affordable housing. You know what their answer to affordable housing is? Oh, let me ask you first. What does it mean to have affordable housing? Does it mean let me ask this way. Does it mean more expensive housing? Does anyone think affordable means just add a few extra costs on? I don't. And that's what governments do. They add cost, and then they add cost, and then they add more cost. One municipality in the region announced that they were going to have a major affordable housing process, and all they were going to do was add $5,000 to the cost of every unit that was being built. How does that work? How do we let that happen? I think what we have to do is we have to demand that whatever the core issue that you have, it can be affordable housing, it can be transit, it can be it can be climate change, it can be health care, it can be education. If you think things are going great, then continue to sit on your hands. If you don't think they're going great, think of what we need to do and then start doing it. You know, honestly, I'm going to get frustrated here. I am so frustrated with people saying, oh, this is what I care about. What are you going to do about it? Well, not very much. We're all too comfortable. And that comfort leads to complacency. And complacency leads to complicity in the challenges that we face. You know, the Zajacs were not comfortable with what was going on. They did something about it. They do something about it. And they don't stop because the pressures against that never end. So I think that the world is tough. It's difficult. It's challenging. But there's nothing that I think if we had a politics of principle where each person in this room gets to decide what they want to do, who's going to be best to get there, and then we measure whether we're being successful or not, we would do much better. Auditor Generals in Canada have said for report after report after report, no one's paying attention to your money. We've just gone through COVID. The government wanted to provide people with economic support. $668 million went to high school students to support their families. Who decided that? They weren't paying attention. And here's the thing, it's your money. The government doesn't just get to take. Unless we decide we're going to live in a sort of a land of the serfs, the government doesn't get to take. We have to demand what they get, and that requires all of us. It doesn't just require people to run for office. It requires good people to run for office. It requires good people to support them. I used to say to people would say to me, actually one of the things they used to say to me, which I loved, was, why can't we ever get someone good to run for office? Which hurt my feelings, but but I got over it. But at any rate, I think, we have to have people that run, and then we have to have people that support them. And we have to have them vote for them, but we have to have them support them as they go through their challenge. Tell them what you think, why you think it. Tell them how to do better. I loved it when people would tell me how to do better.
Okay, well, I've got a double barrel question because I think we might have a few questions from the audience.
Oh, okay.
What are you most proud of that you accomplished or a decision that you made when you were in public office, and what would you have done differently now with hindsight?
Okay, one of the things that I really loved was when Jack Poole introduced me one time. And I'd gone out around British Columbia in the early 90s when I was mayor, and I was president of the Union of BC Municipalities. And people had been pretty excited about what they were going to do. By the end of the 90s, people weren't excited. They were wondering whether they were going to survive. They weren't really planning for much else. And I think we captured some of that sense of frustration from people when we ran in 2001. But what I really liked was when Jack Poole stood up once and he said, Gordon Campbell gave BC its swagger back. Yeah. I think in British Columbia, we deserve to have our swagger. But you don't get the gift without doing the work to get there, right? There is nothing we can't do in this province if we put our minds to it. We can't do everything all at once, but we can sure do one thing, and we'll be surprised at how much we can accomplish if we do it. So that was something that I was very proud of. Some of the social things
We didn't get fussy about it. We had the first AIDS in the workplace strategy in the country, in the city of Vancouver when I was mayor. We had the first children's advocate when I was mayor. You know, things like that, which often get lost in the sort of the big flow of things. So those are some of the things that I'm proud of. I'm proud of our economy, and that we did I think we helped turn the economy around. But when I say we did, I don't think it's we did. I think what we did was you opened the door for the economy to be turned around by the private sector, and the private sector does turn it around, and the private sector is responsible, and the private sector does give back, and we have to remember that. There's, all of the sponsors over here are private sector guys who've done well and want to help their community, want to build their community up. That's what we have to recognize. That's the sort of the secret sauce of Canada from the past, and we want to keep building on that if we can as we move to the future. Our public-private partnerships are something that I was very proud of. Many, many projects, over 2 dozen, 3 dozen almost, that came in on budget, many earlier than we're expected to, because we actually captured some of the ideas of the private sector. And the main lesson, is that what you'd say?
What would you do?
The main thing I would do is I would be way bigger, way faster, way stronger, etc. Everybody runs for office says that.
Actually, you started many of your speeches with that quote about boldness.
Yes?
And you would have been more bold.
Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic. And you can never be bold enough because that status quo is so powerful. You have to be, so we did a 25% across the board income tax cut in our first day of office. The BC Liberals did. Well, I would have done another significant personal income tax cut. Given what I know now, much larger personal income tax cut. I think, in fact, if we had just kept on, we could have eliminated personal income tax in British Columbia and moved forward with more consumption tax and an HST. I don't know if you know this, but some people didn't agree with that idea. But I think that there were things that we could have done, and then you have to be up for the fight. So a lot of people say, well, why did you stop? I stopped because I got tired. I was tired, right? And if the fight is every day. So, but the bigger you go, the better you're going to get. And this is why I think that. When you're up against the status quo, every little thing that you try to change is World War III. Why don't we have open tendering in British Columbia? Because it's World War III to even start to think about opening it up in British Columbia. That's costing you hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year for infrastructure that everyone says they want to build. Why don't we have the things that you want? Why don't we have an education system that meets the needs of every child, including your children, including my children, every child, exceptional children with incredible talents, people that are athletes, people that are involved in the arts, people that can't read, people that can read. Why can't we do that? We should. We just don't do it. Why don't we have a healthcare system that's one of the best healthcare systems in the world? We don't come close to the best healthcare system in the world. In fact, in Canada, we have at least 2 healthcare systems, maybe 3. If you're a federal judge, you can use the private system. If you're not, you can't. If you're a federal inmate, you can use a private system. If you're not, you can't. If you're Mary Smith, if you're Peg Campbell, my mom, and she was doing something at home and she hurt herself, she couldn't get the care that she needed to do the job she needed to do. Not just for her family, but the job she needed to do, period. We don't ask ourselves these questions. So I think one of the biggest challenges we face today, which you didn't ask, but I'll tell you this, the biggest challenge we face today is we're not asking enough questions and we're not demanding enough results. If you don't ask the questions and you don't demand the results, we don't get the change that we need. So, do you have many more questions? Because I should close quickly.
I've got a lot of questions, but
Okay, I'm gonna just
I don't want
close.
to keep people till dinner time.
Oh,
so.
okay.
Howard, do anybody else have questions?
We have someone way back here.
Sorry, I thought you were wrapping up.
I've got a few more questions.
Okay.
Yes, sir, if you can help me.
Gordon, I don't think I speak for myself in saying that we miss you very much. I'd love to hear your reflections on, first of all, I should say that I think that you're one of the most, you're the first post-partisan politician that I know of. And in this polarized, highly partisan environment, particularly since you left office, I'd love your reflections on how we go forward as a society and as a body politic, given the divisions that we have in British Columbia and in Canada generally. And if you were Premier today, or a political leader today, an active political leader, how you would deal with where we are.
Well, first, I should be really honest about this. You know, I was not Premier in the time of massive social media and the sort of the, you know, here's the fact. People get attention by being crazy. And the crazier you are, the more attention you get. And one of the things I think that we have to do is we have to say, we're not up for that. So the first thing I'd do is I'd stand up and I'd say that. I'd say it's time for us to look beyond our partisanship and look for results. I think results and evidence. We need evidence of what we're doing and what's working and what isn't. When the Auditor General say they can't even come close to discovering what's going on, when the Ethics Commissioner in the federal government says, you know, people are more and more afraid to actually record ethical complaints because it will have an impact on what their career is, and no one pays any attention. It's sort of like, oh, who cares? I don't care. I care. So we have to show that we care. It doesn't matter that I care. You know how many votes I get? 1. That's all I ever had. But I had the time, the effort, and the energy, and I was willing to try to make things better. So each of us have got to try and make things better, however we can. You know, you don't have to run for office. You can support people who run for office. But you have to demand that people deal with evidence. And it's kind of like the world has changed, that facts are not as important as feelings. Feelings are important, but facts are really will help drive us towards the kind of feelings we want. So I think you have to stand for what you believe in, and I think we have to hold our elected officials to account, not for what they say, because everyone can say whatever they want. It's for what they do. So as in, you know, we're right now in a civic election, I'd say, what are you going to do about this affordable housing thing? Well, we're really going to work hard on it. Yeah, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to have 2 meetings and we're going to have another report. No, what are you going to do? What are they actually going to do that's going to make housing more affordable? And I can tell you, I could probably go through 5 or 6 things they could do in the city that would make housing affordable, but they won't do them. They want to talk about it, they don't want to do it. So I think you have to put people, you've got to be that aggressive about that. And I think, so I don't want to just talk about the city, I think in the province it's the same thing. I'm actually encouraged by Kevin Falcon. I don't think Kevin Falcon is a polarizing politician. I think some will try to polarize him, but I don't think he's a polarizing politician. I'll tell you this, I worked with him when he was a health minister. He understands healthcare better than just about anyone probably in the legislature today. He understands what we have to do to deliver care for patients, which is what healthcare is about. I don't know when we all decided we were giving up our health decisions to a bureaucrat somewhere. I don't think we did. So I think Kevin will be very good at that. He's not afraid of taking on standing up for what he believes in. I think that's very encouraging. I think federally, I think we have a similar situation right now with the new leader of the Conservative Party. I think he's willing to say, this is what I believe. Here's the thing. You don't have to agree with him. And if you don't agree with him, you shouldn't vote for him. But you should at least give him a chance to say, this is what I would do. And we should require the Prime Minister to say, this is what I would do. And if he hasn't done it yet, ask him why it's taken so long. Because a lot of this can get done much faster than we tell you it can be done. I'll just quickly say, when we went and did our major personal income tax day one, I can remember calling the finance minister designate in and the deputy finance minister into my office when I was still leader of the opposition, but I was going to be premier, to ask them about how we were going to do this, because I knew I wanted to do it. And the deputy minister came and said, Premier, this is just not the time for a personal income tax cut. And I said, that's funny. I just ran for office saying I was going to give people a personal income tax cut. It seems like exactly the time to give a major personal income tax cut. And we took our platform that we ran in 2001, it was on the wall of the cabinet. And if we had a discussion in cabinet was going on, I would often say, when I needed to, what did we say in the campaign? That's what we're doing. If that's what we said in the campaign, that's what people deserve to expect. So I think we have to, as citizens, demand that. One last thing I'll say to you, I think we should, this is a tyranny of the status quo thing. All of the politicians say we can't touch the Constitution. We can't touch the Constitution. They also pretend to you that one person, one vote. In Canada, there is not anything close to one person, one vote. And we should touch the Constitution.
And I'll give you a good example of why. When the Constitution was written in 1867, 3% of people lived in cities. Today it's over 80%. The world has changed. The Constitution is our rules to politicians, not their rules to us. And we should say, we're going to change it to make it work for us the way we want it to work. And that will take work too. That takes a lot of work, but it's worth trying to do. If we want to go back on track, and we want to take off, do that. I'll tell you, I should say this because I'm talking about the problems. There is no place in the world I'd rather be born than Canada. We have all the opportunities in Canada. It's all up, and at the end of the day, it's all up to us.
Well, I think with that, we're going to have to come to a close, but I want to take a moment and just thank you for your service. I mean, Lunch with a Legend is actually apropos. You don't rarely come across individuals who give 30 plus years to public service and really make a dent and an impact and change the province, the country, the city. And, you know, on behalf of all of us in the room, thank you. We do wish that you were more involved now than you were previously, but we really appreciate all that you've done for the city, province, and our country.
Thank you very much. I just want to leave you with this. I just want to leave you with this, okay? This is a really important quote for right now. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate for the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty. We must rise to the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew. We must act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we will save our country. Abraham Lincoln, 1862. Things haven't changed that much. We can do this in Canada too. Thank you guys all very much for the attention.